Brothers and sisters, there was a time when you were unshaken, a time when the world had no chains around your mind. As a child, you did not fear tomorrow, nor did you grieve yesterday. But somewhere along the way, the world taught you fear. It taught you to be ruled by anger, by loss, by the opinions of those who do not even know your name. And so, you suffer. But I tell you now, there is a way to be untouchable, to walk through fire and remain unburned, to stand in the storm and not be moved. If you embrace these 6 principles, nothing will ever have power over you again. Number 1. Control what you can, accept what you cannot. There is a simple truth that many fail to grasp, a truth that once understood can free a man from endless suffering. It is this: you have control over some things, but not over everything. And yet, most people live as if the entire world should bend to their will. They rage against misfortune, curse their fate, and dwell on the actions of others, as if their anger and frustration could rewrite reality. But reality does not change simply because you resist it. The wise man does not waste his strength on things outside his power. Instead, he focuses only on what he can control: his thoughts, his actions, his perspective. There is great power in this understanding. When you accept what is beyond your control, you cease to be disturbed by it. You do not waste your days lamenting the past, nor do you torment yourself with worries of the future. Instead, you place all your energy into the one thing that is truly yours, your own mind. And once you master that, nothing, no person, no event, no tragedy can break you. You will be untouchable, not because the world has become kind, but because you have become strong. Consider the man who obsesses over the opinions of others. He wakes each day wondering what they think of him. He alters his words, his actions, his very essence in an attempt to please them. But no matter how hard he tries, there is always someone who disapproves, and so he suffers. He lives in constant anxiety, never at peace, never truly himself. But tell me, does he have control over what others think? Can he reach into their minds and rearrange their thoughts? Of course not. And yet, he gives their opinions power over his life. He hands over his peace to people who do not even know his soul. But the wise man, he does not concern himself with such things. He speaks as he wishes to speak. He acts as he believes is right. And if others misunderstand, if they judge, if they mock, he does not break. He does not change himself to win their approval, for he understands that their thoughts are beyond his control. Instead, he focuses on his own integrity, his own choices, and in doing so he finds freedom. Then there is the man who resents his past. He looks back at his failures, his mistakes, his losses, and he wishes things had been different. He plays old memories in his mind like a broken record, over and over, as if revisiting them will somehow rewrite them. But no amount of regret will change what has already happened. No amount of guilt, no amount of sorrow will undo a single moment of the past, and so he remains trapped, chained to a world that no longer exists. But why suffer for what cannot be undone? The wise man understands that the past is carved in stone. He does not waste his energy wishing it were different. Instead, he asks himself, what can I do now? What is in my power at this moment? He learns from his mistakes, but he does not let them define him. He carries his past as a teacher, not as a prison. And because of this, he moves forward while others remain stuck, forever battling ghosts that no longer exist. The same wisdom applies to the future. How many people lose sleep over things that have not yet happened? How many waste their present moment drowning in worries about tomorrow? They imagine worst-case scenarios, disasters that may never come. And in doing so they suffer twice, once in their mind and once in reality if it ever comes to pass. But the wise man? He does not live in the future. He prepares, yes, but he does not torment himself over what he cannot control. He understands that no amount of worry will stop the unexpected. No amount of anxiety will change the course of fate. And so, instead of fearing the unknown, he chooses to meet it with strength. He trains his mind. He strengthens his character. And when hardship arrives, as it always does, he does not crumble, for he has spent his energy not on fear, but on preparation. There is another kind of suffering that stems from this same ignorance, the suffering of those who wish to change others. They want people to be different. They want their loved ones to think differently, to act differently, to live differently. And when they do not, they become frustrated. They argue, they push, they fight against reality, as if their anger could force another soul to change. But tell me, do you have control over another person's heart? Can you shape their mind as you wish? You cannot. People will be as they are, not as you demand them to be. And yet, so many spend their days in misery because they refuse to accept this truth. The wise man, however, does not waste his energy on changing others. Instead, he changes himself. He leads by example, not by force. If someone refuses to change, he does not exhaust himself trying to control them. He accepts them as they are, or he walks away. And in doing so, he keeps his peace. Even in times of great misfortune, this principle remains unshaken. A man may lose his wealth. He may lose his health, he may lose the people he loves. And in his grief he may scream at the heavens demanding to know why. But the universe does not answer. It does not bend to his cries. Tragedy happens not because it is fair or unfair, but because it is simply the way of life. And so the wise man does not resist misfortune. He does not curse his fate. He does not waste his strength, wishing things were different. Instead, he asks himself, what now? What is within my power in this moment? If he has lost his wealth, he builds again. If he has lost his health, he does what he can to heal. If he has lost a loved one, he grieves. But he does not allow the grief to consume him. He understands that life will always take, just as it gives. And because he accepts this, he remains unbroken. So, what does this mean for you? It means that every time you find yourself suffering, you must stop and ask, am I fighting something beyond my control? Am I resisting reality instead of working with it? If the answer is yes, then you are wasting your strength. Redirect it. Focus on what is yours to change. Your thoughts, your actions, your choices, the way you respond to the world. These things belong to you and you alone. And if you master them, then no hardship, no loss, no misfortune can ever truly break you. Because while the world remains unpredictable, your mind, your will, your soul, those can remain untouchable if only you choose. Number 2, train your mind to withstand pain. Pain is an unavoidable part of life. It does not ask for permission before it arrives. It does not care who you are, what you have built, or how much you have already endured. It comes in many forms, physical, emotional, mental. It can arrive as loss, failure, betrayal, or the slow erosion of hope. Many fear it, fight it, and curse its presence, but none can escape it. And yet, while most crumble under its weight, there are those who remain unmoved, those who, despite their suffering, stand firm. They do not break, they do not run, they do not beg for relief. This strength is not given by nature, it is forged. It is the result of a mind trained to withstand pain, a mind that does not see hardship as an enemy, but as a test. For pain itself does not determine a man's fate, it is how he responds to it that defines him. The weak man complains, avoids and seeks comfort, but the strong man endures. He meets suffering with a steady heart, knowing that if he can control his mind, then no pain, no matter how great, can ever truly own him. It begins with understanding that pain is not your enemy. Most people view suffering as a sign that something is wrong, something that must be eliminated at all costs. They seek distractions, numbing pleasures, or the false comfort of self-pity. But what they fail to see is that pain is not merely something to be endured. It is something to be used. It is a fire that burns away weakness, a force that sharpens the mind and strengthens the spirit. Every hardship carries a lesson, but only those willing to embrace their suffering will ever learn it. The man who avoids pain avoids growth. He remains soft, fragile, unable to withstand even the smallest discomfort. But the man who faces his suffering with courage transforms. He becomes resilient, hardened, untouchable. He no longer fears what others fear. He no longer flinches at the thought of struggle. Instead, he welcomes it, because he understands that every challenge he survives makes him stronger than he was before. There are those who say they cannot bear their suffering, that it is too much to endure. But tell me, how many times have you believed you had reached your limit, only to find yourself still standing? How many times have you thought, I cannot take this, and yet you continued on? Pain lies to you. It tells you that you are weaker than you are, that you will break, that you cannot go on. But the truth is, your limits are far beyond what you think they are. The body, the mind, the soul, they can endure far more than you believe. The problem is not the pain itself, but the way you perceive it. The moment you stop fearing suffering is the moment you gain power over it. It no longer controls you, no longer dictates your choices. You realize that pain is not the thing to be feared. It is the fear of pain that destroys men. But if you remove the fear, what is left? A challenge, a test, an opportunity to prove to yourself that you are greater than what tries to break you. Many people believe that suffering makes them weak, but this is a lie. Pain does not weaken a man, it reveals his strength. It is in moments of suffering that a man discovers what he is truly made of. Anyone can remain calm when life is easy, when there is no hardship, no loss, no failure. But what happens when the storm arrives? What happens when the weight becomes unbearable? This is when the truth is revealed. The weak man collapses, curses his fate, and begs for an easier road. The strong man does not. He clenches his teeth, straightens his back and moves forward. He does not allow pain to turn him into a victim. He does not ask, why is this happening to me? Instead, he asks, what must I do now? He does not waste energy on complaints or self-pity. He focuses only on action, only on what is within his control. And because of this, he emerges from the fire, not broken but reforged, stronger, wiser, unshaken. To train the mind to withstand pain, one must practice it. Just as a warrior strengthens his body through discipline and hardship, so too must a man strengthen his mind through endurance. Many seek an easy life, one free of struggle, but an easy life produces nothing but weakness. If you wish to be unbreakable, you must seek discomfort. You must embrace challenge, willingly expose yourself to hardship, and refuse to retreat in the face of suffering. This means doing what is difficult, not because it is required, but because it hardens you. It means choosing the harder path, not the easier one, because it makes you stronger. Every time you face discomfort and do not yield, you build resilience. Every time you endure suffering without complaint, you sharpen your mind. And over time you will find that what once seemed unbearable is now merely another test, one you are more than capable of passing. People often believe that their suffering is unique, that no one else has endured what they have. But suffering is universal. The greatest men in history, the strongest minds, the most unshakable spirits, they too have suffered. They too have faced betrayal, loss, and hardship beyond imagining. But they did not crumble. They did not allow their suffering to define them. They turned their pain into fuel, into strength, into wisdom. And if they could endure, so can you. You are not special in your suffering, nor are you alone in it. What separates the weak from the strong is not the presence of pain, but how they respond to it. The weak man allows it to destroy him. The strong man uses it to become more than he was before. Most people search for a way to escape pain, but escape is impossible. No man, no matter how powerful, can avoid suffering. You will experience loss. You will face failure. You will be betrayed, disappointed, wounded. The question is not whether you will suffer. The question is whether you will allow that suffering to own you. Will you let it turn you into a coward, into a victim, into someone who hides from hardship? Or will you stand firm? Will you take your pain and use it as a weapon, a tool, a force that strengthens rather than destroys? If you choose the latter, then you will no longer fear pain, because you will understand it. You will see it for what it truly is. Not an enemy, not a curse, but a test. And if you can pass that test, then nothing, no matter how great, will ever truly break you. Number 3. Do not be a slave to emotion. Emotion is a powerful force. It moves men to great heights and drags them into deep despair. It can build empires, but it can also burn them to the ground. Most people live as slaves to their emotions, allowing anger, fear, sadness, and desire to dictate their every action. They react without thought, driven by impulse rather than reason. When they are insulted, they lash out. When they are afraid, they flee. When they are sad, they sink into despair, and because they allow their emotions to rule them, they suffer endlessly. But tell me, what is a man who cannot master himself? If his moods control him, if his anger blinds him, if his desires lead him astray, then he is no better than a ship tossed by the waves, carried wherever the storm commands. He is not free. He is a prisoner to every passing feeling, unable to stand firm, unable to decide his own course. But the wise man is different. He does not reject emotion, nor does he fear it. He simply refuses to be ruled by it. He acknowledges his feelings, but he does not allow them to dictate his actions. Anger is perhaps the most dangerous of all emotions. It arrives suddenly like fire, consuming reason in an instant. How many men have destroyed themselves in a moment of rage? How many have spoken words they can never take back, committed acts they can never undo, all because they allowed anger to take hold? The weak man believes his anger is justified. He thinks it gives him strength, but in reality it only makes him reckless. It blinds him to reason, turns him into a puppet, controlled by whatever provokes him. And when his fury fades, what remains? Regret, damage, lost friendships, destroyed opportunities. The wise man does not allow anger to control him. He feels it, but he does not act upon it without thought. He steps back, he breathes, he waits. He understands that anger is fleeting, but the consequences of actions taken in anger can last a lifetime. He does not let others provoke him into foolishness, for he knows that the man who angers you controls you, and he refuses to be controlled by anyone or anything except his own reason. Fear is another master that keeps men in chains. It whispers lies, making mountains out of shadows, convincing even the strongest man that he is weak. Fear stops men from taking risks, from speaking the truth, from living fully. It makes them hesitate, second-guess, shrink away from challenge, and in the end it ensures that they achieve nothing because they are too afraid to try. But what is fear, really? It is nothing but a thought, a possibility, an imagined future that may never come to pass. The wise man sees fear for what it is, an illusion. He does not allow it to dictate his actions. He does what must be done, even if he is afraid. He understands that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. When fear arises, he does not run, he stands firm, knowing that on the other side of fear is freedom, and when he faces it again and again, he finds that it loses its power over him. Fear only controls those who allow it to. The wise man does not give it that power. Sadness and despair are emotions that drag many into darkness. When faced with loss, failure, or disappointment, most people allow themselves to be consumed by sorrow. They sink into self-pity, believing that their suffering is greater than they can bear. They stop moving forward, paralyzed by their own pain. But the wise man understands that sorrow, like all emotions, is temporary. He does not resist it, nor does he try to numb it with distractions. He feels it, acknowledges it, but he does not let it take root in his soul. He understands that no amount of despair will change the past, and no amount of grief will undo what has been lost. Instead of drowning in sadness, he chooses to move forward. He does not allow himself to be broken by hardship. He endures, knowing that time will pass, and with it so will the pain. He does not let sorrow define him, because he knows that to live is to face loss, and if one must face it, better to do so with strength rather than weakness. Desire, though often seen as harmless, is another force that enslaves men. It is not just the craving for wealth or pleasure, but the endless hunger for more success, more validation, more power. Most men are never satisfied. They believe that happiness lies just beyond the next achievement, the next possession, the next victory. But no matter how much they gain, it is never enough. They are forever chasing an illusion, exhausting themselves in pursuit of something that will never bring them peace. The wise man does not reject desire, but he masters it. He does not allow himself to be controlled by cravings that will never be fulfilled. He understands that true contentment does not come from external things, but from within. He is grateful for what he has, unmoved by the endless pursuit of more. He does not let desire dictate his life, because he knows that to chase something endlessly is to be a slave to it. And he refuses to be a slave to anything, least of all his own cravings. To control emotion is not to reject it, but to rule over it. Many believe that mastering emotion means feeling nothing, becoming cold and indifferent. But this is not mastery, it is avoidance. The wise man does not suppress his emotions. He allows himself to feel, but he remains in control. He does not let emotion cloud his judgment or dictate his actions. He experiences anger, but he does not lash out. He feels fear, but he does not let it stop him. He grieves, but he does not allow grief to consume him. He desires, but he is not controlled by his desires. This is true strength, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to remain unmoved by its chaos. The man who can master his emotions can master himself, and the man who can master himself is truly free. Most people believe they have no choice but to follow their emotions. They think that when they feel something strongly, they must act upon it. But this is a lie. No man is forced to obey his emotions. He chooses to. Every time you react in anger, every time you cower in fear, every time you allow sorrow to stop you, it is a choice. But if it is a choice, then it can be changed. You can decide in every moment whether to be ruled by emotion or to rule over it. It will not be easy. Mastery never is. It requires discipline, awareness, and the willingness to endure discomfort. But if you choose it, if you commit to it, then nothing, not anger, not fear, not sorrow, will ever have power over you again. You will not be a prisoner to every passing feeling. You will not be a slave to your emotions. You will be free. Number 4. Death is not to be feared. Death is the one certainty in life. It is the only thing that awaits every man, no matter how strong, how wise, or how wealthy. Kings and beggars, warriors and cowards, the good and the wicked, none can escape it. And yet, most men spend their lives fearing it, pretending it will never come, pushing the thought of it away as if ignorance could make it disappear. But what is the point of fearing what cannot be avoided? What sense is there in being terrified of something that is as natural as birth? To fear death is to live in chains, never truly free, always haunted by the inevitable. It makes men weak, desperate, willing to sacrifice their honor, their values, and their dignity just to delay the end. But delay is all it ever is. No man has ever escaped death, and no man ever will. The wise man does not waste his time fearing what must come. He does not run from the thought of it, nor does he let it dictate his choices. He meets it as he meets all things in life, with calm, with dignity, and with the understanding that it is simply part of the cycle. Many men live their lives as if death were a tragedy, as if it were some great injustice that should not be. But tell me, what would life be without death? Without an end, would anything have meaning? If a man were to live forever, would he value a single moment? Would he cherish a single breath, a single sunset, a single conversation? It is precisely because life is fleeting that it is precious. A man who understands this does not fear death. He respects it. He knows that every day is a gift, not something to be wasted in fear or hesitation. He does not postpone living because he understands that tomorrow is never guaranteed. He does not wait for the right time to act, to speak, to love, because he knows that the only time he truly has is now. Death does not take away the value of life, it gives it meaning. The man who fears death has already wasted his life, for he has spent it running from a shadow instead of embracing the light of the present. Fear of death makes men cowards. It makes them cling desperately to life, not out of love for living, but out of terror of the unknown. It makes them betray themselves, compromise their principles, and suffer humiliation, all for the sake of a few more days. But what is a life lived in fear? It is not life at all, it is mere existence, empty and meaningless. The man who fears death is controlled by it. He allows it to dictate his choices, to make him weak, to turn him into something less than what he was meant to be. But the man who accepts death as inevitable is free. He does not fear pain. He does not fear loss. He does not fear the passing of time, because he understands that all things must come to an end. And because he understands this, he lives without hesitation. He does not hold back, does not waste time on petty worries, does not allow fear to poison his days. He is unshaken, unafraid, untouchable. He does not fear death, because he has lived well. The greatest men in history did not fear death. They understood that their time was limited, and they used that knowledge to fuel their actions, not to paralyze themselves with fear. They took risks, spoke the truth, faced danger, all because they knew that in the end death would come regardless. They did not seek to hide from it, they faced it head-on, unflinching, and because of this, they achieved what the fearful never could. Their names are remembered, their deeds are honored, not because they lived long, but because they lived fully. The coward seeks to extend his life at any cost. But what is the use of many years if they are spent in fear? Better to live a short life of purpose than a long life of regret. The wise man does not ask how long he will live. He asks how well he will live. And in the end, when death does come, he does not beg for more time. He does not weep, does not resist. He meets it with a steady heart, knowing that he has done all he was meant to do. Most men waste their lives because they believe they have time. They delay their dreams, their ambitions, their responsibilities, thinking they will get to them someday. But someday is not promised. Someday is an illusion, a lie that makes men complacent, weak, lazy. The man who understands that death is always near does not waste time. He does not wait for the right moment to act, because he knows that the right moment is now. He does not hold grudges because he understands that time is too short for hatred. He does not leave things unsaid because he knows that words left unspoken may never be spoken at all. He lives each day as if it were his last, not out of recklessness, but out of wisdom. He does not rush through life, but he does not waste it either. He savors it, appreciates it, embraces it fully, and when the end comes, he does not lament what he did not do, because he has done everything he set out to do. To fear death is to misunderstand life. Life is not about clinging to existence at all costs. It is about what you do with the time you are given. Some men live 100 years and accomplish nothing. Others live a single decade and leave behind a legacy. It is not the length of life that matters, but the depth. The man who fears death clings desperately to every moment, afraid to lose what he has. But the man who does not fear it is free to truly live. He takes risks, pursues greatness, embraces challenge. He does not waste time on trivial concerns because he understands that every moment is precious. And because of this, he experiences life in a way the fearful never will. He drinks deeply from the cup of existence, unafraid of the moment it will be empty. He does not see death as a curse, but as a natural conclusion to a life well lived. And because he understands this, he does not merely exist, he thrives. When death finally comes, there are only two kinds of men, those who meet it with terror and those who meet it with peace. The fearful man, who has spent his life avoiding the thought of death, will find himself broken in its presence. He will beg, he will weep, he will regret every wasted moment. But the wise man, who has lived without fear, will not resist. He will accept it as he accepts all things, with dignity, with calm, with the understanding that he has done what he was meant to do. He will not grasp desperately at life, because he has already lived it to the fullest. He will not curse fate, because he has always known this moment would come. He will simply step forward, unafraid, ready to face whatever lies beyond. And in that moment, he will have something that the fearful man will never have: peace. Because he has lived well, he can die well, and in the end, that is all that truly matters. Number 5. Seek wisdom, not approval. Most men live their lives chasing the approval of others. They shape their words, their actions, and even their thoughts based on what they believe will earn them praise. They crave validation, fearing rejection, and in doing so they become slaves to the opinions of those around them. But tell me, what is the worth of a life lived to satisfy the expectations of others? A man who seeks approval is never truly himself. He molds himself into whatever the world demands, abandoning his own nature for the sake of acceptance. He suppresses his beliefs when they are unpopular, hides his true thoughts when they might cause disapproval, and follows the crowd even when he knows it is headed in the wrong direction. But what is the price of this approval? It is the loss of self. A man who lives for the opinions of others is never free, for his happiness depends on something he cannot control. He is at the mercy of the ever-changing judgments of the crowd, and in the end, no matter how much praise he receives, he will always feel empty because he has never truly lived for himself. The wise man does not seek approval, he seeks wisdom. He does not concern himself with the fleeting opinions of others, for he knows that truth is not determined by popularity. He does not need the world's applause to know that he is on the right path. He understands that wisdom is its own reward, that the pursuit of knowledge and understanding is worth far more than the shallow praise of the ignorant. He does not fear being alone in his beliefs, because he knows that the majority is often wrong. The crowd follows whatever is easiest, whatever is most comforting, whatever demands the least effort. But wisdom is not easy. It requires thought, discipline, and the courage to stand apart. It requires a man to be willing to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be mocked. But what does that matter? The opinions of the foolish have no weight. The wise man does not live for their approval, because he knows that their judgment is worthless. He seeks only what is true, what is right, what is lasting. Most people trade their integrity for approval without even realizing it. They say what they do not mean, agree with what they do not believe, and act in ways that contradict their own nature, all for the sake of being liked. They sacrifice their values to avoid conflict, betray their own minds to fit in, and, in the end, lose themselves entirely. But the man who seeks wisdom does not waver. He does not change his beliefs simply because they are unpopular, nor does he compromise his values for the sake of acceptance. He speaks the truth even when it is difficult. He follows the path of reason even when it leads him away from the crowd. And because of this, he is unshaken. He does not depend on the opinions of others for his sense of self-worth. He does not need their approval because he has something far greater. He has knowledge, he has understanding, he has wisdom. And while the approval of the crowd is fleeting, wisdom lasts forever. There is no strength in seeking validation. A man who constantly looks to others for approval is weak, for he allows himself to be controlled by forces outside of himself. He is happy when he is praised, miserable when he is criticized, and always uncertain because his self-worth is tied to something beyond his control. But the man who seeks wisdom is unbreakable. He does not need others to tell him who he is, because he already knows. He does not sway with the shifting winds of opinion because he stands on the solid ground of knowledge. He does not waste his time trying to please others because he understands that no matter what he does, there will always be those who disapprove. He does not seek to be liked, he seeks to be right. And because of this, he is free. He is not bound by the expectations of society, nor is he concerned with its judgment. He walks his own path, guided only by reason and truth, and in doing so he finds a strength that no amount of approval could ever give him. A man who chases approval is never satisfied. No matter how much praise he receives, it is never enough. He always needs more, always fears losing what he has gained. He becomes addicted to validation, dependent on the opinions of others for his happiness. But what kind of life is that? To live in constant fear of rejection, to shape oneself into whatever others want, to be nothing more than a reflection of the expectations of others. It is not a life at all, it is a prison. And most men willingly place themselves inside it, believing that the comfort of approval is worth the cost of their freedom. But the man who seeks wisdom understands that true peace does not come from the praise of others. It comes from knowing that one has lived according to reason, according to truth, according to what is right. And that is something that no amount of approval can ever replace. Most men fear being disliked. They fear standing alone. They fear rejection. And because of this fear, they betray themselves. They silence their voices, hide their true thoughts, and follow the crowd, even when they know it is wrong. But the wise man does not fear these things. He does not fear being alone because he understands that truth is often found in solitude. He does not fear disapproval because he knows that the opinions of the ignorant are meaningless. He does not fear rejection because he does not need acceptance to be whole. He understands that to seek wisdom is to walk a difficult path, one that few will understand, one that many will mock. But he does not let this deter him. He knows that the only thing worth fearing is ignorance, and so he continues forward, undeterred, unmoved, unwavering. In the end, there are two kinds of men, those who seek approval and those who seek wisdom. The first will spend their lives chasing the ever-changing opinions of others, never knowing who they truly are, never finding peace. The second will walk their own path, independent and free, guided only by reason and truth. The first will always be at the mercy of the world, shaped by forces outside their control. The second will be their own masters, unshaken by praise or criticism, unbroken by the judgments of others. The choice is simple. One can live as a slave, forever seeking validation, forever bound by the expectations of others. Or one can live as a free man, seeking only what is true, what is right, what is wise. The crowd will always demand conformity. It will always try to pull a man away from his own mind, to make him just another voice in the chorus of approval seekers. But the wise man resists. He stands firm. He thinks for himself, and in doing so he becomes something rare, something powerful, something unbreakable. Number 6. Every obstacle is a gift. Most men curse their misfortunes. They see difficulty as an enemy, obstacles as punishments, and hardship as something to be avoided. They ask, "Why me?" when trouble comes, believing they have been unfairly burdened while others walk an easier path. But tell me, what great man ever became strong without struggle? What warrior ever sharpened his blade without resistance? The weak man complains about the weight of the challenge before him, but the wise man sees it for what it truly is, a gift. Hardship is not something to be feared, it is something to be embraced. It is the fire that forges steel, the pressure that turns coal into diamonds. Every obstacle, every hardship, every setback is an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, and more unshaken. It is not life's blessings that make a man great, it is his trials. And the man who understands this never resents difficulty. He welcomes it. He understands that without resistance there is no growth. Without struggle there is no strength. He does not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead he asks, "How can this make me stronger?" And in that mindset he becomes unstoppable. The weak man spends his life avoiding difficulty. He seeks comfort, ease, and pleasure, believing that a life free of struggle is a good life. But comfort breeds weakness. A man who never struggles never grows. And when difficulty finally comes, and it always does, he is shattered by it. He has no strength to endure, no wisdom to navigate it, no resolve to push through. He has spent his life avoiding the very thing that would have made him great. But the wise man understands that hardship is the greatest teacher. He does not seek an easy life, because he knows that an easy life is an empty one. He seeks challenge. He seeks difficulty. He knows that every obstacle is an opportunity to prove himself, to sharpen his mind, to strengthen his body, to harden his spirit. He does not wish for a life free of struggle. He wishes only for the strength to overcome whatever stands in his way. And because of this, he does not fear obstacles. He welcomes them. Every obstacle presents a choice, to shrink or to rise. The weak man sees difficulty and decides that he cannot go on. He tells himself the challenge is too great, the burden too heavy, the road too long. And so he stops. He surrenders to hardship, allowing it to break him, to turn him bitter, to make him a victim. He lets obstacles define him, not as a man who overcomes, but as a man who was beaten. But the wise man understands that obstacles do not exist to stop him. They exist to shape him. He does not surrender to difficulty, he uses it. He does not allow obstacles to defeat him, he forces them to serve him. Every hardship, every failure, every setback becomes fuel for his fire. He does not waste time feeling sorry for himself, does not waste energy wishing things were easier. He knows that growth is not found in ease, but in effort. And so he presses forward, no matter how great the resistance, knowing that with each step he is becoming something greater than he was before. Most men believe that obstacles take something from them. They think that hardship robs them of joy, that struggle diminishes them, that failure is a sign of weakness. But this is a lie. The truth is that obstacles give far more than they take. They offer lessons that cannot be learned in comfort. They reveal strength that would have otherwise remained hidden. They strip away illusions, forcing a man to see himself as he truly is. His weaknesses laid bare, his fears exposed, his resilience tested. And in that revelation there is power, because once a man knows his weaknesses, he can strengthen them. Once he faces his fears, he can conquer them. Once he endures suffering, he realizes that he is capable of far more than he ever imagined. The man who understands this does not resent hardship. He is grateful for it, because he knows that every obstacle is not an end, but a beginning. Not a wall, but a doorway. Not a curse, but a gift. The greatest men in history were not those who had easy lives. They were those who faced the greatest hardships and refused to be broken by them. They were men who saw obstacles as opportunities, who turned suffering into strength, who transformed difficulty into wisdom. They did not wish for a life free of struggle, because they knew that struggle was the very thing that would make them great. A man who is given everything becomes nothing. A man who has to fight for everything becomes unstoppable. This is the truth that separates the weak from the strong. The weak man prays for ease. The strong man prays for the strength to endure difficulty. The weak man runs from hardship. The strong man runs toward it, knowing that it is in hardship that he will find his greatest power. The weak man complains about obstacles. The strong man is grateful for them. And in the end, only one of them will rise. The man who resents obstacles will always be at their mercy. He will see them as unfair, as barriers placed in his way to keep him from success. And because of this, he will never move forward. He will allow himself to be stopped by resistance, controlled by difficulty, defined by failure. But the man who embraces obstacles will never be stopped. He will not see them as barriers, but as stepping stones. He will not curse them, but use them. He will not allow them to break him, but force them to make him. And in doing so, he will become something greater than he ever thought possible. He will learn to see hardship not as an enemy, but as an ally, not as something to be feared, but as something to be embraced, not as something to be avoided, but as something to be sought. Because he understands that every obstacle is not just a challenge, it is a gift. A man's life is defined not by how easy it was, but by how well he faced difficulty. No one remembers the man who never struggled. No one honors the man who was given everything. No one respects the man who ran from hardship. The only men who are remembered, honored, respected are those who endured, those who fought, those who stood in the face of difficulty and did not waver. And, in the end, this is what separates the ordinary from the great. The ordinary man sees obstacles as the end of the road. The great man sees them as the path itself. The ordinary man runs from struggle. The great man seeks it. The ordinary man wishes for ease. The great man wishes for the strength to endure difficulty. And in the end, the ordinary man is forgotten, while the great man's name lives on. Because he understood the truth. Every obstacle is not a burden, it is a gift. The world will test you, life will strike you down. But remember this, you are not made of glass, you are made of fire. No man, no tragedy, no storm can shake you unless you allow it. Stand firm, walk forward, and let nothing ever own your soul. Thank you.